Roman Empire, Episode 5. Patricians, Plebeians, and the Struggle for Rights. Learn While Sleeping History Series. Part 1. Opening. The Republic finds its first conflict. The Roman Republic was born from a rejection of kingship. In Roman memory, the last king had become arrogant, violent, and dangerous. After his expulsion, Rome promised itself that no single man would again hold the city like a private possession. Power would be divided. Magistrates would serve for limited terms. Councils, assemblies, customs, and sacred obligations would shape public life. But the end of monarchy did not mean the beginning of equality. The young republic was still a society of rank, ancestry, land, and obligation. Some families stood at the center of religious authority, political office, legal knowledge, and military command. These families were known as the Patricians. Around them lived a larger body of Roman citizens known as Plebeians, farmers, laborers, artisans, traders, soldiers, clients, and in time, even wealthy landowners who lacked patrician ancestry. The first great struggle of the Republic was not Rome against Carthage, nor Rome against Greece, nor Rome against a foreign empire. It was Rome against itself. It was a long internal contest over rights, dignity, debt, law, and access to power. Later Roman writers called it the conflict of the orders, a struggle between patricians and plebeians that unfolded across nearly 2 centuries. This struggle did not destroy the Republic. In many ways, it built it. Through pressure, compromise, protest, and reform, Rome slowly created institutions that allowed wider participation without abandoning aristocratic leadership. The process was uneven, incomplete, and often tense. Yet it gave Rome a political culture in which citizens could demand recognition not only with weapons, but with law, assemblies, and collective action. So tonight, we move away from kings and founding legends, and we enter the quieter but deeply important world of early republican politics. We will listen to the voices beneath the marble, the debtor afraid of losing his freedom, the soldier returning from war to ruined fields, the noble family guarding ancient privilege, and the plebeian community learning that unity itself could become a form of power. Part 2. Patricians, the old families of Rome. The patricians were not simply rich people. They were the old, recognized families of Rome, families that claimed ancient ancestry and sacred authority. In early Roman society, politics and religion were closely connected. To hold public office was not only to command men or manage laws, it was also to preserve the favor of the gods. Ritual, memory, family reputation, and public authority formed one world. Patrician families controlled much of the early republic's highest offices. They dominated the Senate, held priesthoods, knew the unwritten customs of law, and often possessed the social networks needed to command armies. Their power rested on land, ancestry, marriage alliances, and a political culture that treated tradition as a form of legitimacy. They were the guardians of mos maiorum, the ancestral custom that Romans believed had made their city strong. To a patrician, privilege was not always seen as selfishness. Many would have argued that their families carried the burden of leadership because they had inherited the experience, discipline, and sacred knowledge required to guide the state. In their view, order depended on hierarchy. Rome survived because the best families served, commanded, sacrificed, and advised. But to the plebeians, this same order could feel like exclusion. Laws were not fully written down. Legal procedure could be obscure. Political office seemed closed. Debt could become a chain. Military service could protect Rome while leaving one's own farm unattended and vulnerable. A citizen could fight for the Republic and then return home to find himself trapped by creditors. This is one of the most important lessons of early Rome. Citizenship did not automatically mean political equality. A Roman could be a citizen, a soldier, a taxpayer, and a father of a household, yet still lack meaningful protection against elite power. The Republic began with a powerful idea of shared public life, but the meaning of that sharing had not yet been settled. Part 3. Plebeians, the many faces of the common people. The plebeians were not a single economic class. Some were poor rural farmers, Some worked as craftsmen in the city. Some were small traders. Some were clients attached to powerful patrons. Others became wealthy through land, commerce, or military success. What united them was not poverty alone, but exclusion from certain forms of patrician privilege. In the early Republic, Rome was still a relatively small but ambitious city-state. Its survival depended heavily on citizen soldiers. When war came, farmers left their fields, took up arms, and marched for the city. This military service created a dangerous contradiction. The Republic needed plebeian bodies for war, but the political order often denied plebeian voices in peace. Debt became one of the sharpest sources of anger. A small farmer might borrow money after a bad harvest, after military absence, or after damage from enemy raids. If he could not repay, he might face severe consequences, including forms of debt bondage. Roman tradition remembered these stories with moral force. Veterans who had defended the city returning in poverty, their bodies marked by war and their households threatened by creditors. Whether every dramatic story is literally exact matters less than the pattern they reveal. Early Rome was a society under pressure, war outside the walls, inequality inside them, and law often controlled by those already powerful. For plebeians, the question became simple and profound. If we are Roman citizens, if we fight for Rome, if our blood defends the city, then what does Rome owe us? The answer did not come all at once. It emerged through collective action. The plebeians discovered that their strength was not only in the army, it was also in withdrawal. If they refused cooperation, if they left the city, if they stopped serving the state, Rome itself could not function. Out of this realization came one of the most famous early acts of political pressure in Roman history, the secession of the plebs. Part 4. The First Secession, when the plebeians walked away. Around 494 BCE, according to Roman tradition, plebeian frustration reached a breaking point. Rome faced military danger, but many plebeians were angry over debt, harsh treatment, and lack of political protection. Instead of simply rioting within the city, they made a more disciplined and symbolic move. They withdrew from Rome and gathered apart, traditionally on the Sacred Mount. This was a powerful act because it did not try to overthrow the Republic. It showed the Republic its own dependence. Without plebeian farmers, workers, and soldiers, Rome could not fight its wars or sustain its civic life. The secession was a peaceful weapon, a refusal to participate in a system that demanded service without granting adequate protection. The patricians were forced to negotiate. The result was the creation of new plebeian officers, the tribunes of the plebs. These tribunes were designed to protect plebeians against abuse by magistrates. Their persons were considered sacrosanct, meaning that harming them was treated as a religious and civic offense. They could intervene on behalf of plebeians and eventually gained the power of veto, the ability to block certain official actions. This was a remarkable development. Rome did not solve inequality by abolishing aristocracy. Instead, it created a counterpower inside the state. The tribunes became guardians of plebeian liberty, not kings, not generals, but representatives of a citizen body that had learned to organize itself. Alongside the tribunes developed plebeian assemblies and plebeian political identity. The plebs were no longer merely the lower order of society, they were becoming an organized community within the Republic, with their own leaders, rituals, decisions, and collective memory. The Republic now contained tension by giving it institutional form. For a sleep documentary, this moment may seem quiet. No burning palace, no battlefield charge, no dramatic assassination. Yet it was one of the most important turning points in Roman history. A group of citizens walked away, and by walking away they forced the state to recognize that power did not only belong to ancient names. Part 5. The 12 Tables, Law Written in Public. One of the great complaints of the plebeians was that law was uncertain and controlled by elites. If laws were unwritten, then those who knew tradition could interpret it to their own advantage. Legal knowledge itself became a form of power. The demand for written law was therefore not a technical detail, it was a demand for visibility. In the mid-5th century BCE, Rome produced the 12 Tables, traditionally dated to 451 and 450 BCE. These laws were displayed publicly and became a foundation of Roman legal memory. They did not create modern equality, and they did not remove all harshness from society. In many ways, they reflected a stern, patriarchal, agricultural world. But their importance was enormous because they placed law into public space. The 12 Tables dealt with family authority, property, debt, legal procedure, inheritance, injury, funerary practice, and civic order. They showed a society deeply concerned with boundaries, between households, between creditors and debtors, between ritual and law, between private injury and public judgment. They also revealed how Roman law grew from practical conflicts rather than abstract philosophy alone. For plebeians, written law meant that elite interpretation could be challenged. A citizen could point to a public rule. The law was no longer only remembered by those with ancestral authority. It could be seen, cited, and learned. Roman boys in later generations were said to study the 12 Tables as a basic text of civic identity. The 12 Tables did not make Rome democratic in the modern sense. They did not end social hierarchy, but they marked a major step in the Roman habit of turning conflict into procedure. A dispute over power became a demand for law. A social crisis became an institution. Again and again, this pattern would define Roman history. Rome was not gentle in its legal imagination, but it was serious. It believed that public order required recognizable rules, and in the long struggle between patricians and plebeians, the written law became a bridge between memory and citizenship. Part 6. Marriage, office, and the opening of power. After the 12 Tables, the struggle did not end. Plebeians wanted more than protection. They wanted dignity, legal equality, and access to the honors of the state. One major issue was marriage between patricians and plebeians. If marriage between the orders was restricted, then social separation would remain built into Roman family life. In 445 BCE, the Lex Canulea permitted intermarriage between patricians and plebeians. This was not merely a romantic reform. Marriage in Rome was political, social, and religious. It connected families, property, alliances, and future generations. Allowing intermarriage weakened the old boundary between orders. It made Roman elite society more flexible and allowed wealthy plebeian families to enter networks of influence. The next major question was office. Could plebeians become consuls, the highest regular magistrates of the Republic? For a long time, patricians resisted. The consulship was not just administrative power, it carried military command, public prestige, and symbolic authority. To open it to plebeians meant admitting that noble ancestry alone could not define service to Rome. In 367 BCE, the Licinio-Sextian laws marked a major step. They are traditionally associated with opening one of the consulships to plebeians. Soon after, plebeians began to reach the highest offices of the state. This did not mean that poor Romans suddenly ruled Rome. In practice, wealthy plebeian families rose into a new governing elite alongside patrician families. This is a subtle but important point. The conflict of the orders was a struggle for rights, but it also created a broader aristocracy. Over time, the old patrician monopoly weakened, and a new nobility emerged, made up of both patrician and successful plebeian families. Roman politics became more open than before, but still deeply competitive, elite, and hierarchical. Rome changed without becoming simple. It did not move from oppression to perfect freedom. It moved from closed privilege to negotiated privilege, from birth alone to a wider but still aristocratic competition for honor. Part 7. Tribunes, assemblies, and the power of the plebs. The tribunes of the plebs became one of the most distinctive offices in Roman history. Their power came from the plebeian body, and their role was protective, political, and symbolic. They could stand between a citizen and a magistrate. They could speak for plebeian interests. Their veto could stop actions judged harmful to the plebs. The tribunate reminds us that Roman liberty was often understood as protection from domination. To be free was not only to vote, it was to have someone who could defend you against arbitrary power. In a world of patrons, creditors, magistrates, and military commanders, this protection mattered deeply. Plebeian assemblies also grew in importance. At first, their decisions applied mainly to plebeians, but the long direction of Roman reform moved toward wider recognition. The crucial endpoint came in 287 BCE with the Lex Hortensia, which made decisions of the plebeian assembly, known as plebiscites, binding on all Roman citizens. This is often treated as the formal conclusion of the conflict of the orders. By then, Rome had been transformed. Plebeians had gained tribunes, written law, intermarriage, access to high office, and legislative authority. The old patrician monopoly had been broken. Yet the Republic did not become a society of equal citizens in the modern democratic sense. Wealth, family reputation, patronage, land, and military achievements still shaped power. The Roman achievement was different. It created a system in which internal conflict could be absorbed into public institutions. The plebeians did not simply disappear into obedience. The patricians did not disappear into defeat. Instead, the Republic expanded its political body while preserving a strong culture of rank and honor. This balance was powerful, but also fragile. The same structures that allowed Rome to manage early social conflict would later face much larger pressures: conquest, wealth, slavery, land inequality, ambitious generals, and mass politics. The early struggle for rights taught Rome how to compromise, but it also taught Romans that organized pressure could reshape the state. Part 8. Daily life beneath the political struggle. Behind every law and office stood ordinary life. The conflict of the orders was not only about assemblies and magistrates, it was about farms, debts, marriages, military service, and household survival. Early Rome was still close to the soil. Fields, livestock, grain, boundaries, and family labor mattered more than marble monuments. Imagine a plebeian farmer before dawn, waking in a modest house, preparing tools, watching the sky for weather, and calculating what remained after debt, seed, taxes, and family needs. Then imagine the call to war. He leaves his land to fight for Rome. While he is away, crops may fail, property may suffer, and creditors may wait. When he returns, the glory of citizenship may feel distant from the pressure at his door. Now imagine a patrician household, old masks of ancestors preserved, rituals performed carefully, sons trained for command, daughters married into alliances, clients arriving in the morning to greet their patron. This world believed deeply in duty, dignity, and inherited obligation. It did not see itself as merely greedy. It saw itself as responsible for Rome's continuity. The conflict between these worlds was therefore not a simple story of good and evil. It was a structural struggle inside a growing state. Rome needed hierarchy for command, but participation for survival. It needed tradition, but also reform. It needed elite leadership, but could not ignore the citizens who filled its armies. This is why the Roman Republic is so historically interesting. It was not designed once perfectly by philosophers. It was built gradually, through crisis. Its constitution was not a single written document in the modern sense. It was a living arrangement of customs, offices, assemblies, religious rules, family prestige, and hard-won political memory. The plebeian struggle gave Rome a deeper idea of citizenship. A citizen was not only someone ruled by the city. A citizen was someone who could make claims upon the city. Part 9. Closing. The Republic learns to negotiate with itself. By the end of the conflict of the orders, Rome had changed profoundly. The patricians remained important, but they no longer held the same exclusive command over public life. Plebeians had gained recognized representatives, written legal protections, access to marriage across orders, access to high office, and eventually, legislative power binding on the whole citizen body. This long struggle did not make Rome peaceful forever. It did not erase inequality. It did not prevent future crises. But it gave the Republic a political language: veto, assembly, magistracy, law, honor, citizenship, and compromise. These words would echo through Roman history for centuries. The deeper lesson is that Rome's strength did not come only from conquest. Before Rome could dominate the Mediterranean, it had to survive its own internal divisions. Before Roman armies marched far beyond Italy, Roman citizens had to decide what kind of community they were defending. The answer was never final, but the process gave Rome flexibility. In the quiet darkness of early Republican history, we can see the foundations of Rome's later greatness. Not yet emperors, not yet legions crossing continents, not yet marble forums filled with imperial statues. Instead, we see citizens arguing over debt, law, office, and dignity. We see a city learning that power must sometimes bend in order to endure. Episode 5 is therefore the story of Rome's first great social negotiation. The Republic did not become equal, but it became broader. It did not abandon hierarchy, but it opened paths through it. It did not silence conflict, but gave conflict a place inside the state. And this matters because the Rome that would later conquer Italy, face Carthage, absorb Greece, and build an empire was shaped first by this internal struggle. The plebeians did not merely ask to be protected by Rome, they demanded to belong to Rome. In our next episode, we will follow the Republic outward, beyond internal reform, and into the wider Italian world. Rome will begin to fight, ally, absorb, and expand. The city that had negotiated with itself will now begin to negotiate and battle with the peoples around it.